Oh!
It was a new day in the world of Machado Craftia. City buildings stacked up hundreds of blocks high. The sun just barely tasted the sky, and I got up prepared for another day. I worked for the king of all Machado Craftia, Mark Andrew Theodore Richard Machado. He was an angry and bitter ruler, yet most people would call him fair. As for me, I was just a simple guard. I loaded up my inventory with my iron sword and torches, and headed off from the guard barracks and assumed my position alongside the throne as I patiently waited for my king to be escorted from his quarters by the most well-trained guards in the kingdom. They were known as archangels. I straightened my armor and drew my sword, trying my best to look like an archangel myself, but I could never even scratch the surface of those soldiers. I came from a farm in the south of all Machado Craftia. You just couldn't put a soldier in me. I was forced to join ever since the war broke out against the Rebel Alliance. It was either me or they would have forced my father to join. He was reaching his 60s. I couldn't let it happen, so I'm stuck in the kingdom working for the Empire, which wasn't too bad since I was kept fed and paid. When the king finally arrived, the archangel shoved me aside and told me to head down the steps, and so I did. The day passed and dinner time had just ended. The king demanded for entertainment, so a few guards escorted a jester with a silly outfit, white painted face, blue eyes, and a red smile. It bothered me the way he was a little creepy, but other than that, he put on a good show. He told jokes, made funny sounds, and faces. Then, he even saddled up a pig and rode it around the throne room. He finished it off with an egg juggling. I watched as the jester flawlessly juggled 5 eggs, eventually finishing it off with all the eggs landing on his head. I busted out laughing and quickly shut my mouth while noticing the king's grim stare. I couldn't believe it. An amazing show, yet the king was far from amused. He told the guards to kick the jester from the kingdom and back into commoner life. The jester's tired face grew darker and creepier. The guards dragged him out of the throne room. Just as he was taken out the door, he smiled and winked at me. I felt sorry for him, but what can I say? If the king wasn't entertained, there's not much I can do. I headed back to my quarters, landing into my bed. I fell straight to sleep. I had a dream that I was in my bed, and every time my room was visible, the jester was in a different part of the barracks rooms. A few hours passed. I awoke and checked my golden clock. It was just a few hours till sunrise. I got up and lit a torch to find the kitchen. When I placed the torch on the wall, I couldn't see very far, but I could tell the floor felt different. The floor was sticky and red. Blood! I threw more torches onto the wall, lighting up the room. The guards' bodies were laid out on beds. The guards were stabbed, suffocated, or their necks broken. I panicked and ran to the chest closest to me. I put on some armor and ran to the castle's throne, through the hallways yelling, "Help! Help! We need help in the guards' barracks!" I figured we were under attack by the rebellion in our sleep, but I didn't understand why they had left me alive. I sprinted to the throne. I couldn't believe my eyes. Archangels dead all around the throne room, every single soldier slaughtered. I sprinted even faster toward the king's quarters. The 2 guards at his door were torn to bits. I feared the worst for the king himself. I could not let the king die on my watch, so I drew my sword and barged to the door. I stopped breathing at that moment. The queen was dead. The king, Mark Andrew, was in the hands of the killer. No way in the nether realm, it was just one man. I knew this man. It was the jester. His face paint looking perfect. There was not a scratch on him. The king looked at me and his eyes told me everything. There was no helping him now. The jester held the king in one hand, and in the other was a sword. Not an ordinary sword. A sword carved out of obsidian, and a handle of bone, with a few bits of human flesh still on it. The jester was chuckling. The king kept a strong face, but it didn't slow the jester from shoving his sword through him slowly. The king's will broke, and into a scream of pain, blood came out of his mouth, and I yelled, "No! The Jester's attention snapped towards me. With that very same creepy smile, he removed his sword and raised his hand. I flew back and was held against the wall. He slowly walked towards me, drew his sword, and slowly pressed it into my stomach. I tried to scream, but the pain was worse than I had ever imagined it would be. I was terrified and heard laughter as if it was coming from the sword itself. I tried to scream, but for some reason all I could do was laugh. The Jester leaned close into my face. Before my vision and laughter faded,